Right now, as you watch this video, somewhere on the planet, a mosquito is landing on the skin of a sleeping child. The bite is almost imperceptible. Its tiny proboscis, thinner than a human hair, pierces a capillary and injects saliva containing an anticoagulant so the blood doesn't clot. The whole process takes 2 to 3 minutes. The child doesn't even wake up. And 10 to 14 days later, the fever begins, the kind from which he may never recover. In 2024 alone, malaria killed 610,000 people. The majority of them were children under 5 in Africa. And the mosquito is just number one on the list we're going to review today. 13 insects that kill people. Not in horror movies, not in the distant past, but right now, every day, on every continent. Some kill with venom, some with diseases, and some do things to the human body that will make you want to move away from the screen. The further we go down the list, the more horrifying the picture becomes. So make yourself comfortable, and let's start with a creature that doesn't kill, but causes such horror that people faint when they learn it lives under their skin. In the tropical forests of Central and South America, from southern Mexico to northern Argentina, lives a fly that locals know all too well. Dermatobia hominis, the human botfly. The adult looks like a large bumblebee, 12 to 18 millimeters long, with a yellow face, metallic blue abdomen, and orange legs covered in thick hairs. It looks harmless. And if this fly simply bit, it wouldn't make any horror list on the planet. But the botfly doesn't bite. It does something much worse. The female botfly catches a mosquito or another blood-sucking insect, glues 10 to 50 of her eggs to its abdomen, and lets it go. The mosquito flies to a human, lands, and starts drinking blood. The heat of the body activates the eggs, and tiny larvae hatch directly onto the victim's skin. They then penetrate the bite wound or a hair follicle and begin burrowing into the subcutaneous tissue. The botfly larva lives under human skin for 6 to 12 weeks. It grows by feeding on living tissue and breathes through a small hole, a pore it keeps open. If you look closely, you can see the larva moving under the skin. People describe the sensation as something crawling inside you, and for many, the mere awareness of it is worse than the pain. The larva's body is covered in rows of backward-facing spines that act like anchors, making it impossible to pull out. Trying to extract it with tweezers usually ends with the larva tearing apart, leaving parts inside and causing severe inflammation. The traditional extraction method is to cover the pore with a piece of meat or Vaseline. The larva begins to suffocate and crawls out in search of air. The human botfly rarely kills, but secondary infections, suppuration, and abscesses can lead to serious consequences, especially if the larva settles near the eye or in the skull area. For people in endemic regions, the botfly isn't an exotic curiosity. It's a daily problem. Livestock suffers even more. Several larvae can infest one cow at once, causing weight loss and hide damage. Now imagine, you're on vacation in Belize, come home, and a couple of weeks later notice a strange pimple on your leg that won't heal. The clinic doctor diagnoses folliculitis, and only a month later it turns out something with spines and a mouth apparatus is living inside. In 2005, the New England Journal of Medicine published a case of a patient who returned from Central America with 5 nodules on his skin. Each contained a separate larva. Doctors covered the pores with Vaseline for 2 hours, and all 5 larvae crawled out. The photos from that article are still used in parasitology textbooks. Not pleasant. But if the botfly is the master of disgust, the next insect on our list is the master of pain, the absolute world champion in this discipline. Paraponera clavata, the bullet ant. It got its name from the sensation its sting leaves. People compare the pain to a gunshot wound. The bullet ant lives in tropical forests from Nicaragua to Paraguay. Among all insects on Earth, its sting ranks at the very top, a 4+ on the Schmidt Pain Index. Entomologist Justin Schmidt, who created this index, personally experienced stings from 78 species of Hymenoptera, and the bullet ant came out on top. Schmidt described its sting like this: walking over flaming charcoal with a 3-inch nail embedded in your heel. Only for this ant did he award a 4+, the maximum on the scale. The bullet ant is one of the largest ants in the world, about 2.5 centimeters long, reddish-black, wingless, with powerful mandibles and a stinger that looks more like a wasp's. The stinger is 3.5 millimeters long and injects a cocktail of neurotoxins that causes a wave of pulsating, burning pain that doesn't subside for 24 hours straight. In addition to the pain, the venom can cause swelling, tachycardia, enlarged lymph nodes, muscle paralysis, and even hallucinations. The good news: no one has ever died from a bullet ant sting. Schmidt wrote, "Paraponera is the star of stories worth telling your grandchildren. If you get stung, you might think you won't live to see your grandchildren, but rest assured, no one has ever died from bullet ant stings." The bad news: the Sateri Mawe tribe in Brazil uses bullet ants in their male initiation ritual. Teenagers put on gloves filled with live ants and keep their hands inside for 10 minutes. They repeat this 20 times over several months. Only after that is a boy considered a man. Many participants describe numbness in their hands for several days and uncontrollable shaking of the whole body. Anthropologists who observe the ritual note that some young men lose muscle control for a full day, and their hands swell to the size of boxing gloves. But no participant has ever refused the ritual. That would mean remaining a boy in the eyes of the tribe forever. And if you think this is the worst thing ants can do to a person, you're wrong. In Central and East Africa live ants that don't rely on venom, they rely on numbers. Doralus, driver ants, also known as siafu. One colony can number up to 20 million individuals. When food supplies run out, the entire colony rises and forms a marching column, destroying everything alive in its path. The soldiers have enormous heads with long, scissor-like mandibles capable of cutting flesh piece by piece. When a siafu bites, it clamps down so tightly that local tribes, including the Maasai, historically use these ants as surgical staples. They would bring the ant to the edges of a wound. It would close its mandibles on both sides, and then they would tear off the body, leaving the head as a clamp. A siafu column moves at about 20 meters per hour, slow for a human, but deadly for anyone who cannot move. The main victims are infants, the elderly, the sick, and animals tied to the ground. Documented cases exist of sleeping infants dying when a column of ants pass through a house at night. Between 20 and 50 people die each year from siafu attacks, mainly in rural areas of Africa where there's no way to evacuate quickly. Yet siafu have a paradoxical, useful side. Farming communities sometimes welcome a column passing through the village because in a few hours the ants destroy all pests, from termites and cockroaches to rats. After a siafu visit, the house stays clean for weeks. Villagers simply leave their homes for the duration of the column's passage and return when the ants have moved on. In a BBC documentary, they filmed a siafu column crossing a stream. The ants linked their bodies together, forming a living bridge that the rest walked across. When they encountered an obstacle, soldier ants formed living architecture, bridges, tunnels, protective walls, out of their own bodies. 20 million organisms acting as a single superorganism. Nature combined a sanitation worker and a killer in the same creature. Now let's move to another continent. Solenopsis, fire ants, earned their name deservedly. Their venom, solenopsin, feels like a burning match pressed against the skin. Originally from South America, they have spread across the entire southern United States, and in 2023, the first stable population was discovered in Sicily. Fire ants have reached Europe. Climate models show that by 2050, they could colonize a significant part of southern Europe. A single fire ant sting is unpleasant, but not dangerous. The problem is that fire ants never sting alone. If you step on their nest, which looks like a low mound of loose dirt, hundreds of ants instantly swarm out, climb up your legs, and sting simultaneously. Each sting leaves a pustule that itches for several days. But the main danger is anaphylactic shock. About 5% of people stung by fire ants die from the allergic reaction. Every year in the United States alone, there are tens of thousands of emergency room visits due to fire ant stings. I remember when I was preparing for this video, I came across the story of a woman in Texas who went barefoot into the yard to get the mail. 2 steps on the grass and she stepped on a nest. By the time she ran back to the house, she had over 200 stings. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. Doctors said a few more minutes and there would have been nothing to save. Fire ants are one of the most successful invasive species in history. After arriving from South America at the port of Mobile, Alabama, in the 1930s, they colonized the entire U.S. South in just a few decades. Their nests can reach 60 centimeters in height and go 1.5 meters deep. One colony can contain up to 500,000 individuals. The annual economic damage from fire ants in the United States is estimated in the billions of dollars. Damage to electrical equipment, agricultural losses, medical expenses. They damage wiring because they're attracted to electromagnetic fields, and short circuits caused by fire ants in electrical panels are a real problem for Texas electricians. Now let's talk about a creature that looks completely harmless. A small, fluffy caterpillar about 5 centimeters long, with soft, brownish-green shades that perfectly camouflage it among tree branches in the southern states of Brazil. Lonomia obliqua, also known as the assassin caterpillar. Until the late 1980s, no one in the scientific world knew that a caterpillar could produce enough venom to kill an adult human. The discovery happened by accident. In the state of Rio Grande do Sul, a strange statistic began to grow. Farmers and loggers were arriving at hospitals with symptoms doctors couldn't explain: internal bleeding, blood in the urine, hematomas all over the body, brain hemorrhages. All the victims worked in the forest. All had come into contact with something on tree trunks. The investigation led to Lonomia obliqua. The body of this caterpillar is covered with rows of tubercles, topped with hollow spines of various sizes. The spines work like hypodermic needles. At the slightest touch, they pierce the skin and inject venom. The venom contains a powerful anticoagulant, a substance that prevents blood from clotting. The anticoagulant binds to proteins in the body cells and makes them leak. Blood stops stopping. Internal bleeding spreads through the organs and eventually reaches the brain, causing compression and death. By various estimates, Lonomia obliqua is responsible for the deaths of at least 500 people in South America. A lethal dose requires 20 to 100 spine punctures, but since the caterpillars sit in groups on tree trunks, it's enough to accidentally lean your hand against a tree to receive a critical dose. A person doesn't even immediately realize what happened. The first symptom is mild burning. A few hours later come headache, nausea, and vomiting. After a day, hematuria, bleeding gums, bruises all over the body. If the antivenom, fortunately developed by Brazilian scientists, is not administered, the next stage is brain hemorrhage. The irony is that the very same anticoagulant that kills people is now being studied as a potential drug for thinning blood and thrombosis. The venom that causes bleeding may save someone from a stroke. Nature plays on both sides here. In the Guinness Book of Records, Lonomia obliqua is listed as the world's most venomous caterpillar. Before research on this caterpillar, scientists didn't even consider the possibility that a butterfly larva could kill an adult human. Zoology delivered a surprise no one was prepared for. What insect on our list do you think has the most harmless nickname? Think about it. I'll tell you about it in a couple of minutes. But first, let's move to Japan. Vespa mandarinia, the Asian giant hornet, which American media in 2020 nicknamed the murder hornet. 5 centimeters long, Wingspan of 7.5 centimeters, the size of an AA battery, the largest hornet on the planet. Its stinger, about 6 millimeters long, injects venom that destroys red blood cells and causes tissue necrosis. A description of a sting from someone who was stung by an Asian giant hornet. Red-hot thumbtacks stuck into the body. In their natural range, Japan, China, Korea, these hornets kill between 30 and 50 people per year. A healthy adult needs about 59 stings for a lethal outcome, but for an allergic person, one is enough. In 2013, Chinese media reported a series of attacks in Shaanxi province. 42 people died and 1,500 were injured over several months. But the most impressive thing about these hornets isn't what they do to people. It's what they do to bees. The attack happens in 3 phases. First, reconnaissance. A lone hornet flies to a hive, catches bees at the entrance, bites off their heads, and forms meatballs from the thoracic parts to carry back to feed its larvae. Then, marking. The scout hornet marks the hive with a pheromone, inviting its relatives. And finally, the massacre. A group of several dozen hornets bursts into the hive and begins methodically decapitating bees. One hornet can kill up to 40 bees per minute. In a few hours, 30 hornets destroy a colony of 30,000 bees, leaving a pile of headless corpses. After that, the hornets take the larvae and honey. European honeybees are completely defenseless against this attack. But Japanese honeybees, Apis cerana, have developed a remarkable defense mechanism. When a scout hornet approaches the hive, hundreds of bees swarm it and form a tight ball around it. Then they rapidly vibrate their thoracic muscles, raising the temperature inside the ball to 47 degrees Celsius. The hornet dies at 45 degrees Celsius. The bees can withstand up to 48 degrees Celsius, a difference of 3 degrees, and the hornet is literally baked alive inside the bee ball. If the scout doesn't return, the attack doesn't happen. In 2020, when Asian giant hornets were discovered in Washington state in the northwestern U.S., panic swept the country. Headlines screamed about an invasion. Entomologists tried to explain that bees, wasps, and regular hornets kill an average of 62 people per year in the United States alone, while giant hornets kill a few dozen worldwide. But who cares about now, to the creatures that kill quietly, without pain, without noise, without visible traces. Let's start with the sandfly. Phlebotomus, a midge 2 to 3 millimeters in size. So small it can slip through an ordinary mosquito net. Its bite is almost imperceptible, and it is through this bite that the parasite Leishmania, the causative agent of leishmaniasis, enters the human body. Leishmaniasis exists in 3 forms. Cutaneous, ulcers on the skin that can take months to heal, leaving disfiguring scars. Mucocutaneous, the parasite destroys tissues of the nose, mouth, and throat, literally eating the face from the inside. Visceral, Kala Azar, in which the parasite affects internal organs, spleen, liver, bone marrow. Without treatment, visceral leishmaniasis kills in 95% of cases. According to the World Health Organization, between 700,000 and 1 million new cases of leishmaniasis are registered worldwide each year, and 20,000 to 30,000 deaths. The disease is widespread in 98 countries, from Brazil to India, from East Africa to the Mediterranean. 310 million people are at risk. And here's what's striking. The Leishmania parasite itself is about 100 million years old. A fossil sandfly preserved in Burmese amber from the Cretaceous period was found with organisms resembling Leishmania in its proboscis. The parasite that ate people's faces in medieval Baghdad already existed when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Arab scholars in the Middle Ages knew that a person who had recovered from cutaneous leishmaniasis gained immunity, and they practiced vaccination. They applied exudate from active ulcers to the buttocks of small children, especially girls, so the scar would remain in a hidden place while the face was protected from disfigurement. Primitive vaccination, centuries before Jenner and his smallpox. Today, leishmaniasis is treatable, but the treatment is heavy, lengthy, and expensive. For residents of poor countries in Asia and Africa, access to therapy remains a problem. And the sandfly continues to fly, so small that most people don't even notice its bite. 2 millimeters that change a life forever. And now, remember, I asked which insect has the most harmless nickname? Here it is, the triatamine bug. Its affectionate folk name is the kissing bug, because it bites sleeping people in the area of the lips and eyes, the softest, most unprotected tissues of the face. It sounds almost romantic. Reality is the opposite. Triatamine bugs are carriers of the parasite Trypanosoma cruzi, the causative agent of Chagas disease, American trypanosomiasis. The transmission mechanism is one of the most disgusting in nature. The bug drinks the blood of a sleeping person and simultaneously defecates next to the wound. The parasites are in the feces. When the person, still asleep, scratches the bite site, they rub the infected excrement into the wound or into the mucous membranes of the eyes or mouth. Trypanosoma cruzi enters the bloodstream. In the acute phase, symptoms are weak or absent altogether. Mild fever, headache, muscle pain. Most infected people don't even know they're infected. The parasite goes dormant for 10, 20, 30 years. Then the chronic phase begins. Trypanosoma cruzi quietly destroys the heart muscle and tissues of the digestive tract. 1/3 of patients develop serious cardiac disorders, arrhythmia, heart failure. 1 in 10 experiences enlargement of the esophagus or intestines. Many only learn about the disease when the damage is irreversible. According to the WHO, about 8 million people worldwide are infected with Trypanosoma cruzi. More than 10,000 people die from Chagas disease each year. The disease is endemic in 21 countries in Latin America, but due to migration, it is spreading worldwide. In the United States alone, an estimated 280,000 people live with Chagas disease, most of whom don't know it. The disease is named after Brazilian bacteriologist Carlos Chagas, who described it in 1909. More than a century has passed since then. An effective vaccine still does not exist. Treatment with anti-parasitic drugs works only in the early stage, which usually passes asymptomatically. The WHO classifies Chagas disease as a neglected tropical disease. Neglected because it affects the poor, and the poor don't fund research. April 14th is World Chagas Disease Day, established by the WHO in 2020. The date chosen is the anniversary of Carlos Chagas's discovery, but most people in the world have no idea this day even exists. Everyone knows about malaria, only a few know about Chagas disease. And yet kissing bugs have been found in 28 U.S. states. While they rarely carry the parasite in these latitudes yet, scientists warn that with climate change, the risk zone is expanding. And if Chagas disease is a quiet killer that works over decades, the next disease on our list is a killer that acts faster and harsher. The tsetse fly, Glossina, is a native inhabitant of sub-Saharan Africa. Large, from 6 to 16 millimeters, yellowish-brown or dark brown, with a characteristic proboscis pointing forward. The tsetse fly feeds on blood, and through its bite it transmits the parasite Trypanosoma brucei, the causative agent of African sleeping sickness. The name sleeping sickness is deceptively mild. The disease proceeds in 2 stages. The first, the parasite multiplies in the blood and lymph. Fever, headache, joint pain, enlarged lymph nodes. The second, the parasite crosses the blood-brain barrier and enters the brain. Neurological symptoms begin. Disruption of the sleep-wake cycle. The person cannot sleep at night and loses consciousness during the day. Confusion, lethargy, seizures. Without treatment, sleeping sickness is fatal in 100% of cases. Not 95%, 100%. In the late 1990s, early 2000s, an epidemic raged in Africa. Up to 500,000 infected, 80% of whom died without receiving a diagnosis. In the 20th century, the tsetse fly determined where in Africa people could live and where they could not. Entire regions remained uninhabited because of the fly's presence. It influenced colonization, trade routes, and political borders. The situation has changed radically now. Thanks to systematic control programs, the number of registered cases of sleeping sickness has fallen by 97% over the last 20 years. In 2024, fewer than 600 cases of the Gambiense form, which makes up 92% of all cases, were registered. The WHO has set a goal of complete elimination by 2030. But this victory has an unexpected twist. A study in Zimbabwe's Zambezi Valley, based on 27 years of data, showed that the tsetse fly population is sharply declining due to rising temperatures. Global warming is killing the flies, which cannot tolerate the heat. It would seem great news, but at the same time, higher, cooler areas that were previously free of tsetse flies may become suitable for them. Climate doesn't destroy the problem, it moves it. The tsetse fly has another amazing biological feature. Unlike most insects that ensure offspring survival through quantity, laying hundreds and thousands of eggs, the tsetse fly carries a single larva inside its body. The female literally feeds the larva with special milk until it is fully developed and gives birth to one already ready for pupation. One fly produces only 8 to 12 offspring in its lifetime, a strategy more like a mammal than an insect. And it is precisely this slow reproduction that makes the tsetse fly vulnerable to the sterile insect technique. When sterilized males are released into the population, they mate with females but produce no offspring. What personally struck me about this topic is this. An insect that determined the fate of an entire continent for centuries, that made fertile land uninhabitable, can be defeated, not by poison, not by technology, but by patience and systematic efforts. When humanity decides that a problem deserves attention, it is capable of the extraordinary. But we don't always decide that, and that brings us to the next killer, the flea. Pulex irritans, the human flea, a tiny wingless insect 1.5 to 3 millimeters long, flattened from the sides, with powerful hind legs that allow it to jump a distance 200 times its own body length. The flea is one of the most perfect parasites created by evolution. Its body is covered with a smooth shell and backward-facing bristles that allow it to move through fur and hair like a torpedo through water. Catching a flea with your fingers is almost impossible. It slips away. Crushing it is also difficult. The shell can withstand pressure many times greater than the insect's weight. By itself, the flea is an annoying but tolerable parasite. The bites itch and become inflamed, but rarely cause serious problems. However, in the 14th century, the flea became the instrument of the greatest catastrophe in human history. The Black Death, the pandemic of bubonic plague caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, from 1346 to 1353 killed, by various estimates, 25 to 50 million people in Europe. That's 30 to 60% of the entire population of the continent. For decades, it was believed that rats spread the plague. More precisely, fleas living on rats that, after picking up Yersinia pestis, jumped onto people. But in 2018, researchers from the University of Oslo and the University of Ferrara published a paper that turned this theory upside down. Using mathematical models based on mortality records from 9 European cities from 1348 to 1813, they tested 3 scenarios of spread, through rats, airborne, and through fleas and lice on the people themselves. Result? The human fleas and lice model matched the real data significantly more accurately than the rat model. In other words, the plague spread not from rats to people, but from people to people, through parasites living on our own bodies. The flea that lived in our clothes, in our beds, in our hair carried the bacterium that killed half of Europe. 25 to 50 million people, one tiny insect making one jump from person to person. The plague has not disappeared. In the 21st century, bubonic plague still occurs in several countries, including Madagascar, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and even the United States, where several cases are registered annually among people in contact with infected rodents in the Southwest. The difference is that today the plague is treated with antibiotics. In the 14th century, there were no antibiotics. There was only the flea. The scale of this catastrophe is hard to comprehend. In some cities, up to 90% of the population died. Bodies were stacked in piles because there weren't enough living people to bury them. Europe's economy was set back centuries. Entire craft traditions disappeared because their carriers died. Churches lost authority because prayers didn't help. The Black Death changed everything, from labor law to cemetery architecture. And behind it all stood a flea the size of a poppy seed that jumped from person to person, carrying a bacterium whose existence people would only learn about 500 years later. And now we've reached the finale. Insect number 1. The creature that kills more people than any other animal on the planet. More than sharks, crocodiles, lions, and snakes combined. More than all the other 12 participants on our list put together. The mosquito, Culicidae. There are more than 3,700 species of mosquitoes on Earth. They live on all continents except Antarctica, and they carry such an arsenal of diseases that epidemiologists call the mosquito the most dangerous animal in human history. Malaria, dengue fever, Zika virus, chikungunya, yellow fever, West Nile virus, lymphatic filariasis, and that's far from a complete list. Only females bite. They need protein from blood to mature their eggs. The mosquito has a special organ, the maxillary palp, that detects carbon dioxide exhaled by breathing and directs the insect to the victim. Mosquitoes prefer people who drink beer because alcohol increases ethanol content in sweat, and ethanol attracts mosquitoes. Alcohol also raises body temperature, making a person a more noticeable target. In one feeding, a female drinks 3 times her own body weight in blood. But the mosquito's main killing power is malaria. Its causative agent, the Plasmodium parasite, is transmitted only by females of the Anopheles genus. According to the latest WHO data, in 2024, there were 282 million cases of malaria worldwide and 610,000 deaths. 95% of deaths occur in Africa. 75% of all those who died were children under 5. Every 2 minutes, a child dies from malaria. Since 2000, thanks to international programs, 2.3 billion cases of infection and 14 million deaths have been prevented. But the number of cases continues to grow. In 2024, there were 9 million more than the previous year. Climate change is making the situation worse. After the flooding in Pakistan in 2022, the number of malaria cases in the country increased 8-fold, from 500,000 to 4.3 million, because stagnant water created ideal conditions for mosquito breeding. Analysts from the Malaria Atlas Project and Boston Consulting Group calculated, if malaria control remains at current levels, climate change will lead to an additional 550,000 malaria deaths between 2030 and 2049. 500,000 additional deaths from just one disease transmitted by one mosquito. Throughout human history, mosquitoes have killed, by various estimates, more people than all wars combined. Some historians estimate the total number of people who died from malaria throughout the history of civilization at 50 billion, more than half of all people who have ever lived on Earth. The figure is debatable, but even if it's twice as high, the scale remains incomprehensible. The mosquito shaped the course of history. Malaria weakened armies and decided the outcomes of wars. It influenced the colonization of the tropics, the slave trade, the construction of the Panama Canal, and the settlement of peoples. A creature weighing 2.5 milligrams, with a brain of several 100,000 neurons, living on average 2 to 3 weeks, the most effective killer on the planet. During the construction of the Panama Canal, malaria and yellow fever killed more than 22,000 workers, more than landslides, explosions, and accidents combined. The French, who started the project in 1881, lost so many people to mosquito-borne diseases that they were forced to abandon construction. The Americans, who took up the canal 20 years later, began with draining swamps and spraying insecticides, and only after that did construction become possible. The mosquito lost the battle for the Panama Canal, but by that time it had already taken more than 20,000 lives. And you know what? We still haven't defeated it. The first malaria vaccine, RTSS, was approved only in 2021. It reduces severe cases of malaria in children by about 30%. 30% is a huge breakthrough, and at the same time evidence of how far we still have to go. And in November 2025, the first non-artemisinin drug for malaria in 25 years was announced, ganaplacide lumefantrine, which may be able to fight drug-resistant strains of the parasite. Maybe. When I was gathering material for this video, I caught myself thinking, we're afraid of sharks, although they kill fewer than 10 people a year. We're afraid of snakes, although most species pose no threat. We're afraid of spiders, although deaths from their bites are extremely rare. But the creature that actually takes hundreds of lives every day, the mosquito, we perceive as an annoying nuisance at dinner on the terrace. Perhaps that is the main power of the most dangerous insects. We are not afraid of them. We swat them away with our hand, literally. We are used to thinking that real danger is something big, with teeth and claws. But in reality, the deadliest creatures on the planet weigh less than a coin and fit on a fingertip. 13 insects, from the botfly that lives under the skin to the mosquito that lives in every corner of the planet, from the caterpillar that causes unstoppable bleeding to the flea that killed half of Europe, from ants that devour everything in their path to the fly that puts people to sleep and kills them. Together they kill more people than all predators, all natural disasters, and most diseases not associated with insects. And they will continue to do so. Every day, every night, in every corner of the planet, because insects appeared on Earth hundreds of millions of years before us. They survived 5 mass extinctions. They will survive us too. The only question is whether we will learn to live alongside them, or will continue to consider them a minor nuisance while they quietly go about their business. If this video was useful, give it a like. It helps the algorithm show the video to those who will find it interesting. Subscribe to the channel. Every week, new videos about animals, nature, and science come out here.